non-stop Nikhil. We're in our 7th country, Mozambique. I'm with Kevin here. Kevin's been tasked with taking me to find a shop where I can get a SIM card and get access to information, because I tell you, I literally plan day to day, and I just arrived here last night and I have no idea what I'm doing today because I couldn't research last night. I have no idea what there is to do in Maputo. So far I've only booked 2 nights, so 1 full day here with Casa de Maria, who is this like wonderful grandmotherly type woman living with her 2 daughters, but she has 3 children and multiple, about a dozen grandchildren spread around the world. So it's a very authentic experience here. As you can tell, you're definitely not in the middle of a capital city like Maputo. This is the first time I'm in a country where I don't actually speak the language, but I've been improvising with my broken Spanish, and then whenever I learn the equivalent word in Portuguese, I just substitute the equivalent Portuguese word into my Spanish, and typically it's understood, and I can also understand. So that's all I need. It's just a good two-way communication, and that's all I can expect at this point. But I got his name and I learned that he's 11 years old, so it works well. ¿Cuál otro idiomas?
De aquí.
Aquí, tú falas portugués.
Yeah.
Y otro idioma, ¿no?
Un poco inglés.
Un poco de inglés. Okay. ¿Posso falar inglés contigo?
Sí.
No? So he says he speaks a little bit of English, so I'm like, oh, can I just speak in English with you? You ¿puede practicar inglés conmigo? ¿Por qué no? Like trying to say, oh, you can just practice your English with me, why not? We'll see. But Mozambique is completely different from South Africa, and I'm not just talking about the wealth, but I'm also just talking about the weather, because that's the first thing you notice. I've been walking outside now, it's only 9 a.m. We've been walking just maybe like less than 5 minutes now, and it's both humid and the sun is burning hot, and I'm already drenched in sweat. So that's just what it's going to be like from now on, at least for the next 10 days while I'm still here. So speaking a little bit about what I'm doing here in Mozambique over the next 10 days, over the next few videos. I just flew here from Cape Town, starting here in Maputo, and then over the next 10 days I'm going to be making my way up the coast, up the Indian Ocean coast to Pemba, which is in Cabo Delgado province, and then from there I'll be flying northward. First day out in Maputo, and it's almost past noon. We just left the Ulene area where I'm staying with Maria, and we're heading to the center of town, just passing by the beach. And from what I hear, you mean the beaches in the capital city are always the worst. And if this is just the worst beach, then I can't imagine how great the actual beaches must be, the ones that we'll see farther up the coast later on in our trip. But I really don't know what to expect from Maputo. I haven't really done much research. All I have is the tuk-tuk here with me for the day, and then we'll see where they take us. We're approaching the city, and you've got the beach on one side. On this side, there's food trucks selling food. It's about to be lunchtime, and then right in front of me, you've got the tall skyscrapers and everything of Maputo. We just also passed a mall, so you can tell that there's definitely a lot of commercial activity going on here as well. I saw an eye doctor called Dr. Agarwal, so maybe there are Indian people who live here too. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Our first stop here in Maputo has been the fort, or Fortaleza, And it looks a lot like many of the other forts you might find in Spanish or Portuguese colonies in the Americas. You find that same architecture and that same design style here on the Indian Ocean coast. And what's really interesting is that I was planning on telling you some of the basic history and milestones of Mozambique just as an introduction, but the exhibit here pretty much covered it. So using these traditional wood figures, they've crafted the narrative of the history of Mozambique, starting from the indigenous peoples to the arrival of Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese explorer in the late 1400s, early 1500s, and then the series of Portuguese settlements which were found along this coast of the Indian Ocean for trade purposes. Again, this is such a strategic location because it allowed for Europeans to round the southern coast of Africa at the Cape of Good Hope, near where we were in Cape Town, and then find access to the strategic trade routes of the Indian Ocean for spices, for jewels, for everything that was pretty much valuable at that time. The narrative then continues to talk about how different European powers would fight amongst themselves for access to those trade routes and in turn to the European settlements along the Indian Ocean coast. Again, as we've talked about since the beginning of our journeys here in Africa, it wasn't until the Berlin Conference when the European powers came together at one table and sort of agreed on how they would divide up the continent. So after that, we have the fight for independence. We have discussions about the Gaza Empire, who fought against Portuguese colonial oppression here in Mozambique. And after that, the exhibit actually talks about issues leading up to modern day. For example, right after Mozambique gained independence in 1975, it quickly descended into a civil war which lasted up until 1992. It wasn't until 1994 when general elections were introduced, but even then there was almost a low-level conflict burning between, and that conflict wasn't put to rest until the 21st century. The exhibit also discusses various modern phenomena such as coexistence of religious communities here in Mozambique, about 60% being Christian, 20% being Muslim, and then various other belief systems as well. We also hear about malaria, the fight against malaria, the fight against HIV/AIDS here in Mozambique, as well as their pride in their sports teams, being basketball and soccer, all of that encapsulated, the whole culture encapsulated really in these wooden structures. Now it's going to be so interesting to compare and contrast the narratives and histories between what we found on the Atlantic coast there in Senegal and Gambia and even Ivory Coast, and how colonialism and its legacy has impacted the communities here on the Indian Ocean coast. Because here on the Indian Ocean coast is a different mix of ethnic histories. There's the presence of many different groups who've been operating here even before the Europeans founded their settlements on this coast. So we have the Arabs who were present here trading, working in their cultural influence, spreading Islam, spreading the Arabic language here on this coast. We have Indians, we have people from other parts of the African coast, known as the Swahili coast, people from what is current day Kenya and Tanzania. So we have so many different cultural impacts and influences on this coast, which we didn't necessarily find when the Europeans were engaged in their colonial settlement project on the Atlantic coast. Now this area of the fort with all the cannons behind me, right in the middle of the city, just goes to show exactly how active of a military zone this used to be and how important of a strategic point Maputo would be on the Indian Ocean coast. If you laid claim to this fort, that means that all of your European competitors would want to come fight you offensively. It also meant that local Bantu speaking kingdoms and their leaders would want to attack you. It meant that traders from across the Indian Ocean or might not want you in power here. That's why they would so proudly set up these cannons here right in the middle of the city to showcase their power and their ownership of this area of the Indian coastline. Our second stop of the day is the Maputo Central train station, and whether you know it or not, apparently Maputo's train station is one of the most beautiful in the world. It's been ranked by Time, Newsweek, Indian Express, all these other publications, Condé Nast, whenever they've made their list of the most beautiful train stations in the world, Maputo's train station ranks somewhere between the third and the seventh. So that's exactly what this museum is trying to showcase. Behind me there's a mock train, but whenever I ask people exactly what trains run from here and whether they're actually practical to get anywhere, I don't really seem to get a clear answer, so I think the answer is no. However, it's a nice homage to the history of the railroad. I have no doubt that, like in many colonialized areas with a good railroad, this was not all a rosy romantic story for why the railroad was constructed. Pretty sure the railroad, just as many other places, namely like India, if you think about it, why do we randomly have such good railroads in the subcontinent? Because the British wanted to be able to efficiently mobilize personnel to various corners of the subcontinent cheaply and efficiently, and also cheaply and efficiently extract natural resources from the interiors into their main port cities to then be transported back to Europe for processing. It is really, really hot here. It is unbelievable. This is like the worst of Abidjan mixed with the heat of northern Senegal and Mauritania. It's like a 2-in-1. We're at the central market here in Maputo, and we can take a look at how the market here and the produce here might be different from the produce that we saw in markets in West Africa. So I just obviously am attracted to spices and colors and flavors. So I just stopped by a stall selling spices, and I was like, oh, it looked like from some of the packaging that they were all coming from India. But the vendor told me that some of them are from Mozambique, some of them are from India. And she was like, this dana, coriander is from Mozambique. So I think they've taken the word,
Curcuma powder.
Yeah. Curcuma. So the
Então, colorão from Mozambique. Inteiro é esse. Isso é esse.
No conozco eso.
Páprica colorão.
Páprica.
Yes.
Como páprica.
Yes.
Es como eso.
Yes.
And food.
Powder. From Mozambique.
Okay, the Mozambique.
Yes.
And I was talking about the coriander. They use the same word, dhania, from Hindi, but they call it dana in the local language here. So you can just tell how that Indian Ocean trade has really made its impact today.
Ginger from Mozambique.
A gente utilizando épices na cozinha.
Cozinha, yes.
Cozinha.
Sim.
Como utilizam?
Por no caril.
Caril.
Sim.
Okay.
Yes. Baobab from Mozambique.
Okay. Baobab. Okay.
From Mozambique.
Gente Moçambique gostam de comida picante ou não? Não picante.
Normal.
Eu sou Índia.
Yes.
Sim.
Gosta de picante.
Gostam de muito picante.
Nem criança, nem
Coril, todo caril muito picante.
Temos o caril picante.
Sim.
Esse é o nosso picante. Lá nós misturamos esse picante com curcuma nosso.
Sim. With the turmeric.
Com colorão nosso.
Okay.
Com coriandro nosso. Não, masala, gominho.
E como tu te
E um gadinho de piripiri.
Como te chama? Cidaria.
And you?
Nickel.
Nickel.
So
Thank you.
Cidaria is telling me that they use all of these spices for the curries here, but the curries are not spicy. However, if you want things to be spicy, you can use the pepper powder here.
Yeah.
However, they use the other spices
Moringa?
for flavor and moringa. So I was looking for something that was local and not one of the spices that I actually recognize. And behind me, they actually have these pre-made sauces being sold in jars. And so I asked what exactly that is, and that is the piri piri sauce. So if you go to Nando's, that's kind of where it originates from. It's that flavor that's lemony, peppery, a little spicy, but altogether just very delicious. Everyone, so we just had lunch at a small restaurant right by the market. Lunch consisted of a beef curry with some sort of palau kind of rice, and of course some nice spicy piri piri sauce to go along with it all. Now we're continuing our look into Maputo today, and we're at Jardin Tunduro, or Tunduro Park, which has been a long time staple of the city. It's actually been a green space right at the heart of the city since the late 1800s. So I told Albert to leave me alone for the evening, and I just figured I would walk around Maputo for the couple hours this afternoon until about 7:30, and then I'll have Albert come pick me up, take me back to Maria's place. But it's just amazing to compare where I'm staying out on the outskirts in Ulene, and the center of Maputo is actually quite nice. It's pretty walkable. There's a bunch of historic buildings, modern buildings, a lot of art, a lot going on here. It's a pretty navigable city as well. Like, you can walk around easily. Everything's in like sort of grid system, so you can't get lost that quickly. And if you're just here for the key sites, everything is pretty concentrated right in a couple blocks of that grid. So I actually regretted even having the tuk-tuk for the entire day when I came here, because I figured you could just come down here in the morning, walk around, and then in the evening head back to wherever you're staying if you're not staying in the center. After being in South Africa, where I couldn't imagine doing this in Johannesburg, being able to just walk down the streets of of Maputo and vlogging out in public all alone with nobody telling me that I should be taking an Uber is a great feeling, and you can feel the security and safety here. I think I'm also in a pretty nice area of town now, leaving the crowded marketplace and then heading towards the water and towards the more diplomatic area where I think a lot of expats live, and you find a lot of nice restaurants. As confident as I am in traveling in so many different parts of the world, that's just something I need on a daily basis. And I know my limits. You've seen where I'm staying. It's very, very different from home. If I can just take an hour or two out of my day to just sit in a cafe that looks more like home with blasting air conditioning, where I can just gather my thoughts, do the research I need to make the rest of the trip go smoothly, I like to take some time to do that, because you can easily burn yourself out if you honestly try to make every minute of your day 24/7 all about the most authentic experiences possible, because that's not sustainable. You're going to get homesick, you're going to miss what you're used to, and you're eventually going to burn out and then just want to go straight back home. And I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to slowly continue to float my way through my trip as I've planned. So I always try to budget money-wise, time-wise, effort-wise, to ensure that I get some of those comfort experiences alongside all the authentic experiences, which I try to build into my itinerary as well. The sun is about to go down, and I'm ending my day here in the beautiful tree-lined neighborhood of Polana Cimento A. And you can just see that this is an Oceanside neighborhood. There's a strong breeze. It's gorgeous, wide sidewalks, businesses everywhere, gorgeous villas hosting banks and the like, international organizations. And you just can't help but contrast where we started this morning in Ulene, the very local neighborhood, to where we are right now. It's almost like it's multiple different countries. So I'm just gonna walk around, maybe find somewhere to get dinner. I don't know if I'm exactly very hungry, but at least find somewhere to enjoy the city a little bit, enjoy the scenery, and then I will contact Albert to come pick me up, and then we'll head back to the reality for the vast majority of Mozambicans in Ulene. I just like to show these neighborhoods. Everyone thinks that the only things available in much of Africa looks like Ulene, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. You can find literally every opportunity, every amenity to cater to every budget here, especially when you're in the capital cities. So when you're in the capital cities, that's when you can rest, relax, breathe a little bit, because I have no idea what the rest of our time here in Mozambique has in store for us. I actually don't even know where I'm going to go tomorrow. I don't know how to get there. I don't know what time I need to leave, but we'll just go with the flow. We'll just go with the flow. I've been realizing that since I went to South Africa, having just the plan system, the structure, the everything, everything being so certain there, like we have it in the US, has just made me lose that sense of go with the flow. So I'm sure Mozambique is going to shake my system. It's going to give us a lot of adventures. It's going to give us a lot of surprises, and you're going to all be experiencing that with me. So with that, I'm going to close today's vlog. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.